It's time to have your say. Welcome back to the Q&A. AskSCW is back once again answering your questions in the wrestling community on WWE, Impact Wrestling, AEW, and much, much more straight after this. Welcome back to another episode of AskSCW, and the Royal Rumble is a heavy focus on today's episode, especially after SmackDown this past week. Is there a WWE and Impact Wrestling relationship, a working relationship? Is that forbidden door well and truly open after Mickie James, the Knockouts champion, was announced to be a part of the Royal Rumble match? That is the top topic here today. As well as that, going to talk about Brock Lesnar versus Bobby Lashley. What's going to go on with Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns? Is there going to be a unification match for the championships? And much, much more. It's the year of monetization on SCW. That is the goal. So if you're watching today, please stick throughout the whole entirety of this video. I really, really do appreciate your support. But without further ado, let's get in with our first question this week. Coming from Jamie Holmes, asking, do you think Mickie James being in the Royal Rumble is a sign of a WWE Impact relationship? Or like him, do I think it's a one-off with Vince trying to get a legend known for their WWE stint in the Rumble? I'll combine this with Mike's question, Italian Habs Mike also saying, with Mickie James showing up at the Women's Rumble, would it mean more if she was still the Knockouts Women's Champion, which of course she is after Hard to Kill? And when this Rumble happens, and does it open the door for inter-promotional matches between WWE and Impact Wrestling? It's the topic that's got everybody talking after SmackDown. Mickie James, the Knockouts champion, is going to be a part of the Royal Rumble match. And of course, Pat McAfee made reference to the fact that she was the Knockouts champion from Impact, and it was even mentioned on WWE's social media platform. So yeah, the big question is, will this lead to a working relationship? Or, as has been suggested in the questions, is it just a one-off? Well, first and foremost, I think it's probably more than likely going to be a one-off. But it's been so many crazy things happening in wrestling in the last 12 months. You just couldn't quite rule it out. If you're going through the dirt sheets, the rumours, Ringside News have come out with their sort of take of what they've heard on the situation, is that apparently John Laurinaitis suggested about the idea of getting Mickie James in for the Royal Rumble because amongst WWE's Raw and SmackDown rosters, they've only got 21 women for a 30 women Royal Rumble, so there's not enough people to go around. Of course, so many people have been released over the last couple of years that WWE now don't have the quota to fill these matches, and they figured, well, we'll try and get one of them back in Mickie James, probably unaware that she was doing stuff with Impact Wrestling, which, of course, another source has actually gone on to say that she's not actually signed with Impact Wrestling, not an exclusive deal anyways, and she's been doing stuff with NWA as well. So take these reports for what you will, but of course, the idea is that she's been doing stuff with Impact, and Vince McMahon wasn't so fussed about it. Apparently, he was like, yeah, let's go ahead, let's do it, and was not even against the idea of Impact being mentioned on TV. It seems to be not a problem to do so anymore. So that's quite exciting in itself, and it brings the idea of, well, does it stop here? Is this just going to be the only thing? Well, WrestleVotes today have actually said that WWE is open-minded of having someone from, if you want, the Forbidden Door, since that's the term that's being thrown around, coming in from another promotion to be involved in the Men's Royal Rumble. Now, is that going to be Impact Wrestling? Is it going to be somewhere else? Could it be Ring of Honor? Could it be AEW? Probably not, but maybe even New Japan. Imagine the likes of, I don't know, some Okada turning up for the Royal Rumble match, or Bryan Danielson coming in for this match, or perhaps someone else from Impact. I certainly have been asked that question later in this episode, so I will save that answer for that part. The one thing I'll say about whether it mattered if Mickie James was the Knockouts champion, for me it did, because when you look at it from the perspective of WWE and Impact Wrestling, it ticks the boxes for both sides. For Impact, look at it from their side to begin with, one of the biggest pay-per-views in wrestling on the entire calendar, and their champion is going to be involved in this match, and perhaps Mickie can come down the aisle wearing the championship. How awesome will that be? What sort of promotion will that do for Impact Wrestling? Are WWE trying to make Impact Wrestling the #2 wrestling promotion in the world? I'm sure it's not that petty, but then stranger things have happened. But still, look at it from the WWE perspective of someone coming in that's a champion from somewhere else, someone that is a legend that is known to the WWE audience, coming in and saying, well, I still fancy my chances in the Royal Rumble. Is Mickie going to win? No. So it's not really going to harm anybody in WWE side of their roster looking weak. It wouldn't surprise me at all if WWE actually even eliminated from the match quickly. The thing is, Impact would still get what they wanted out of it because their champion would be on a top WWE show. Maybe their championship will be on offer as well. And the thing is, what's been fun has been teasers on social media of Mickie James and Charlotte Flair. Certainly would be a match that I would be down for seeing if that was to be a possibility. But to look at it, I do think that this is going to be something that I wouldn't say would actually become a forbidden door where we're going to see, you know, lots of Impact talent go to WWE and lots of WWE go to Impact. I mean, we look at Hard to Kill, Ring of Honor was doing that, so it looks like we've got Impact versus Ring of Honor perhaps going forward with the Impact taping. So WWE are not really going to do so much from their side. It's more what can, I suppose, benefit them because maybe they don't have the talents to fill the gaps. They can bring people in and then they can just go again rather than have them signed to the promotion, which, you know, had so many wrestlers doing so. There was a period in NXT when Triple H was actually doing this model. When Samoa Joe first came in, was working Ring of Honor as well. James Storm came in as well. He actually didn't sign with the company, went back off. I think maybe went back to Impact or something like that. So this sort of model has been done within WWE before, but was done with NXT. It's just interesting it's now being done with Vince McMahon and obviously with the Raw and SmackDown model. So it's going to be interesting how it's going to play out. Never say never on this stuff. That's what I will say. Like I say, wrestling's taken a crazy turn. Last year, we had AEW, Impact and New Japan all working together, and you know, Impact is still having that working relationship with everybody, with NWA. If you look with Mickie and what's going on with that, if you look with Ring of Honor now, their stars coming in, and now with WWE, it's who's left for them to work with. They've got AAA as well with Laredo Kid, so they're literally working with everybody and trying to have, you know, all these dream match possibilities within wrestling. So this is something special. It's something fun. Let's enjoy it for what it is and see what comes along the way. But for me, I do feel that this is going to be not necessarily one and done, but certainly isn't going to be one of many. Put it that way. Next question coming from Warren. If you could choose one Impact Wrestling star to show up in the men's Royal Rumble match and make it to the Final Four, who would you pick? Fantastic question this one. In fact, I'm going to answer it in two parts. I'm going to go with who I would pick, but I also will go with who I think WWE would pick. Now, if I was choosing, I would go with Josh Alexander, purely because he's my favourite wrestler in Impact Wrestling. He reminds me so much of Kurt Angle, the way that he wrestles, the way he can do 60-minute Iron Man matches. You know, he's great technical based, he's submission based. You know, I just think he would tick a lot of the boxes and has got a great look, and just think it would be pretty awesome to see him in the Royal Rumble match. And when you go back to look at Hard to Kill as well, when you're saying picking my favourite, that show, let's be honest, it was stacked from start to finish. I think that it worked the whole way through. And if you look at all the men that competed, I feel that Josh Alexander, for me, him and Jonah had the best match on the show, definitely from the men's perspective. So yeah, Josh Alexander would be my pick. But if it was WWE, I think they would pick Moose. I think he's the sort of guy that they would probably go for. Him or a Matt Cardona, or perhaps even a W. Morrissey, someone from that match would be more that would tick their boxes. But I think Moose, who has not been in the company, would be someone I think would work quite well for them. Because A, he's their champion, again, has that same working relationship for both sides. But B, WWE, in my understanding, has tried to sign Moose before. There has been interest in having him in and amongst their company. So if there's been interest there before, maybe he's the guy they would go for. Moose has been on top of his game in the last couple of years or so, and certainly now feels really on top of his game. Now he's the Impact World Champion. So that's who I think they would go for. But for me, I would personally see Josh Alexander in that spot, but hey, if I could see either of them in the Royal Rumble match and see either of them in the Final Four, hey, that'd be pretty awesome to see. I wouldn't be complaining. Next question coming from Danielle Bellini, saying Gail Kim might be the number 30 as a surprise entry following Impact Wrestling mate Mickie James if she's still around in the ring. Could we see Gail Kim challenge Charlotte Flair if she wins in the surprise entry in the Royal Rumble? Great question. I think you've answered there actually in your own question here by the keyword if. It all comes down to if. If she comes in at number 30, if she was to win the Royal Rumble, Could she have the match with Charlotte Flair? Well, if she was to, certainly it would be a possibility, and it's certainly something I'd be down for seeing. The only thing I would say is that Gail Kim hasn't wrestled now for, well, it feels like a number of years now, isn't it? She had the match at Rebellion a couple of years ago against Tessa Blanchard. I have seen in interviews Gail Kim be asked the question if she'd make a return to the ring. In fact, I'll even give a shout out to James from Primetime Conversations, who has asked that question to her just recently. She distanced herself from it. Now, of course, there can be this idea that you know what's going on behind the scenes, and it's like, well, we know something with WWE may be coming on the horizon, and yeah, I would keep it a surprise like AJ Styles did many moons ago when he left New Japan, was saying he wasn't going to be part of the Rumble, and boom, there was his entry number 3. You know, you can't rule anything out, but for me, if I had to put my money on it, I would say that I think it's unlikely that Gail Kim would be in the Royal Rumble match. And let's not forget as well, she's been in WWE a couple of times before, so she would fit the mold of someone they would look for to bring back for the occasion. But at the same time, you would say that a lot of her work that she's sort of most proud of, and perhaps, you know, looks back with more fond memories, is the stuff that she's done in Impact Wrestling. You look at the legendary rivalries with the likes of a Taryn Terrell, perhaps an Awesome Kong, you know, superstars like that. And I even mentioned Tessa Blanchard, the last one that she had before hanging up those boots. But we'll have to see what happens, but I will go at the moment and say I don't think so. Next question comes from Super Sonic X. With all the participants that have been announced for the Women's Royal Rumble match, who will be the remaining 11 women in the match, and who would be number 30 to shock the world? Asuka, Alexa Bliss, or Bayley? Great question indeed. And just to say, I do think all 3 of those women will be back in the Royal Rumble match. I think that's why a lot of the surprise entrants, if you want, the legends have been pre-announced. I think we've got special returns coming back. I think Alexa Bliss is one we're going to know ahead of time as well, because we've got the journey of Alexa Bliss coming back to Raw, I think, going to be starting tonight. Maybe that's going to lead to where we'll just get a bit more in-depth of what she's coming back for, and then perhaps maybe she'll make her return in the Royal Rumble match. But I do think as a surprise factor, I can see Asuka, and hopefully if Bayley is fit and ready, I can see her coming in. Now, if we bring the match graphic onto the screen, I mean, we can see all the people that are actually announced and in the Rumble right now. We can see a lot of the people that are going for the championship opportunities that have not been announced. We look at the Raw side, for example, Bianca Belair, Doudrop, Liv Morgan. None of those have been announced at this moment, so it would be interesting if they were to get a shout. For me, I still would like to see 1 or 2 more legends announced. I mean, of course, there was the question about Gail Kim before, so I would not be against that idea. I think it'd be pretty cool, even though I don't think it will happen. Wouldn't it be amazing to see Deonna Purrazzo come in as well to go after Mickie James? That'd be quite cool as well. And I mean, if I was to give a legend out there, someone that's been in WWE before, why not Jazz? Jazz would be really cool. She did that farewell tour last year. To get one more hurrah in a Royal Rumble match, I think would be really special. It'd be a great way to finish off for Jazz. So that personally would be one I would really like to see. Anthony New with our next question now. Do you think there'll be any NXT 2.0 stars in either the men's or women's Royal Rumble match? Of course, there's always a chance as well. We could get an NXT superstar or 2, but I feel WWE is trying to distance themselves from having half of the NXT women's division in this Rumble. So my feeling is if someone's going to be involved in there, maybe it's to do of a storyline, or they're going to be called up. And I think your most likely favourites, if they were to, would be Raquel Gonzalez and Io Shirai. They would be my most likely if any from NXT were to get the call up. As for the men, well, they seem to have the men's side more covered, so I do feel that's less likely, if we're brutally honest. I think if we get an NXT call-up or NXT 2.0 start in the Rumble, it's either someone that are going to be groomed to try to go on Raw SmackDown very soon, or it's one of the original guard, if you want the NXT 1.0, if you want the black and gold, so like a Tommaso Ciampa, a Pete Dunne, someone like that, or a Johnny Gargano if he was to come back, although for me, I really hope that he will go to All Elite Wrestling, but that's just a personal preference. But you know, someone like that could be a potential, but again, I think that this year it feels to be are trying to distance themselves from having NXT stars in there, which is why I think so many legends were announced ahead of time for the Women's Rumble. We've already had announced that Johnny Knoxville will be a part of the Men's Royal Rumble, which that's just crazy in itself. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see. More names I'm sure will be announced in the coming weeks, and you never know, we might just be surprised 1 or 2 in the match itself. Martin Lorenzo Correa of our next question now saying, what could be 5 things that could make Seth Rollins versus Roman Reigns for the Universal title the most must-see match at the Royal Rumble? And he always appreciates that shout out beforehand, and I've got to say, I always appreciate the questions. Thank you very much, and every time, always give you a shout out. Awesome question, this one. In fact, you give me a good excuse to put my thinking cap on. To the point, I thought of more than 5. So, without further ado, here are my reasons of why this match is must-see and could be almost one of the most must-see things on this show. Reason number 1, Seth Rollins actually was meant to get a title shot last year. In fact, he put himself in pole position for Money in the Bank before Edge came in and, arguably in Seth's eyes, stole the opportunity. Yes, okay, we got Roman Reigns versus Edge at that event, and we did get an amazing program with Edge versus Seth Rollins afterwards. But where was Seth Rollins? I mean, he had the stare down. We were building the storyline towards it. Do you remember if the Usos kept getting in his way and they had the stare down on SmackDown? So we actually are finally getting the match. It's just it's coming, you know, about 6 months later. But yeah, it's better late than never, I guess. At the time of recording, we don't even know why Seth Rollins was the chosen one. Of course, Adam Pearce could have picked anyone from the SmackDown roster, but he's chosen to go for Seth Rollins from Raw. So not knowing the reasoning for that really adds a lot of different dynamic and questions in itself. We might find out a lot more very quickly on Raw this evening or this SmackDown this upcoming Friday. But certainly that for me is an exciting prospect of thinking, well, why are we getting such a high profile match like this at the Royal Rumble when they're on different shows? It also adds the question as well with Kevin Owens. He's been sort of chummy with Seth Rollins about them becoming champion on the road to WrestleMania and perhaps going head-to-head one-on-one. And Kevin Owens even showed the loyalty to Seth Rollins during day one, not breaking up the pinfall. So will Kevin Owens play a factor when it comes into the match? It certainly could maybe be a closer part of an equaliser because the Usos have been helping Roman Reigns in a number of matches previously. So this is definitely an interesting dynamic with all of these coming into play. I think also it goes without saying these are 2/3 of the group, the Shield, probably one of arguably the greatest factions of all time. It's been many years since they faced one another in ring as well, and we've never seen the heel versus heel dynamic between these two. In fact, Roman Reigns has always simply been the babyface when these two have faced off against each other. So this really freshens up the dynamic of a match as well. It doesn't quite feel like you've seen this before. And even what you had seen before was so long ago. So for me, this is exciting and it's fresh. And last but not least, I mean, we have to now look into, you know, the insider stuff of WWE. If you believe the gossip, the rumor mill, the idea, of course, that, you know, Seth Rollins was supposed to win the WWE Championship at day one in that fatal 4-way. The initial rumours suggested Big E was meant to win that match. Then it was rumours coming out that actually no, Seth Rollins was the one that was going to win it. Well, Roman Reigns was pulled from day one due to obviously the COVID stuff going on. Brock Lesnar was thrown to the WWE Championship match and won. Was Brock Lesnar meant to win the Universal Championship on day one on that pay-per-view? Is that what's meant to happen? And now WWE are trying to fill in the gaps to make everything work so that we actually, you know, go back onto the right track when it comes to WrestleMania. What if there was a scenario that Seth Rollins actually wins the Universal Championship and takes it over to Monday Night Raw, where Brock Lesnar then retains against Bobby Lashley, and then it is actually Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns for the WWE Championship at WrestleMania. So that is an exciting prospect as well of why Rollins versus Reigns is also an exciting prospect, because although you might think, well, hang on, title unification is the direction we could be going with Brock and Roman Reigns, in another way, we could be just changing the championships over, which definitely be a big swerve, something that nobody really saw coming. So yeah, I mean, if WWE does actually pull that off, you know, it would be really, really something different, something that no one could have predicted at the end of last year. So yeah, I'm really buzzing for this match, and hopefully after hearing all these reasons, hopefully you watching are as well. Behind the Match Revenge Wrestling Podcast with our next question now. Will Roman Reigns interfere in the Brock match against Bobby Lashley at the Royal Rumble? Well, I speculated one way, let's speculate the other way, because this probably is the one that's the more likely suggestion to happen at the Royal Rumble, because, well, Roman Reigns has not lost that Universal Championship for such a long time, and it feels that Roman's going to keep it forever. So one way you could go for it if you want Reigns versus Brock at WrestleMania is for Roman to retain against Seth Rollins, and for Brock Lesnar to drop the WWE Championship at the Royal Rumble to Bobby Lashley. Now, if you were to go and believe rumour mill once again, apparently Brock's not always been high on having the match with Lashley, and if WWE was to book it where Lashley was to win, would it make more sense that Roman Reigns was the reason, and perhaps Paul Heyman as well? So for me, I think there's certainly a possibility. I think if I was to make a prediction of one of the two case scenarios right now, I think this one is the more likely, but definitely judging with storytelling of what could happen in the next number of weeks in WWE, it's all very exciting, isn't it? And I think that's something that's really good going into the Royal Rumble and the direction to WrestleMania in general. Even if you think you know what the end destination is going to be, there's so many questions that put forth right now, and that's exciting. WWE, do more of this, because the start of 2022 has definitely been interesting, even if you could argue a lot of it has been a complete fluke and accident. Wrestling by Waldridge, our next question now. Do you think we get a world title unification match at WrestleMania leading into a brand split? I feel like we're covering all bases here on this episode today. I love the questions that come in because this is the thing. We have so many questions and we don't know the answers. It's not clear. But if we was to get that unification match, then, well, I mean, it would make sense, wouldn't it, for someone to be the head of both shows? Maybe we say going into a brand split, is it going to be to a draft where it then returns after WrestleMania? Or could it perhaps more likely be the end of the WWE draft? Maybe WWE have released so many people and they're finding hard to cover all these sort of areas that maybe they go back to one roster that's on both shows. I can imagine in a way that Fox and USA wouldn't be fighting who's got to be on what show. They probably would be quite satisfied. So I wouldn't be surprised. And this is, I didn't include this in my bold predictions at the start of the year, which is, I think it's a fun video. I think people should go and check it out if they haven't already. But certainly I think it's a possibility that the brand split could finish this year. Because yes, WWE loves to do the draft. It usually gets a ratings pop and stuff. But if you can make everything work on Raw and SmackDown for everyone under one roof, then maybe they'll do that. Maybe there'll be a scenario where, you know, people still compete once a week, but it's kind of shared out who competes on what show and when. They can, you know, mix both sort of storylines on both sides and, you know, hopefully everyone becomes a winner from it. But I'm not sure how it's going to play out, to be honest. But if we do get unification at WrestleMania, where it's, you know, Brock versus Roman, I would be confident that Roman Reigns would walk away with both championships. Could it even be a scenario that Roman's just on both shows like Becky was with Becky 2 belts a couple of years ago? There's so many possibilities, it's hard to know one way or another, but damn it, as I said in the previous questions, I'm excited of where it's leading to. Next question comes from Non-Stop Wrestling Chat. Who would you like to see Volta face on the main roster? Everybody. No, I mean, I'm sure I couldn't get that on my wish list, but do you know what? If it was to be a Raw or a SmackDown right now, I think SmackDown is the place I would like him to go more. I'd like matches against Roman Reigns. I'd like it to be against Drew McIntyre. I'd like it to be against Sheamus. I think there's some great matches that are there for Volta to have. There certainly will be some great matches on Raw as well with the likes of Big E, Kevin Owens, you know, Seth Rollins, Bobby Lashley. So, I mean, there's, you know, it's the hard hitters. It's the top of the card superstars that I'd definitely be most interested in seeing. But I think the ones that I'd be most excited about right now would be Roman Reigns, would be Drew McIntyre, and would be Sheamus. So for that reason, I definitely would have him on the SmackDown roster. And I certainly think SmackDown right now could do with a Volta on that roster. And the fact that he's now leaving NXT UK and coming over to the States full time, I would not be surprised if he was fast-tracked through NXT 2.0 and moved to Raw SmackDown in the very near future. It feels that WWE finally got what they wanted with him coming to the States. Next question coming from Josie Chats Wrestling. Should AEW consider a roster split if their roster keeps growing? The signings just keep on coming, don't they, from AEW? I mean, if it does, it wouldn't be the worst idea in the world, I guess, because to be fair, how many more people can they fit? The only thing I've always said that I'm against with AEW doing this is that they'll be branded as a copycat of WWE. WWE, that's their thing. They've done the brand split, 2 separate shows. And as well with AEW, we've got Dynamite, which is a 2-hour show. Then we've got Rampage, which is only 1 hour, unless you made that a 2-hour show. Plus you have the Dark and Dark Elevation. I suppose you can split it as kind of like the B shows of those particular brands if you want, but for me, I feel AEW, I like it as it is where everyone's under one roof. I'm kind of even questioning with WWE if they should do that at this point, and that's coming from someone who actually likes the brand split as well. But for me, I think AEW should just keep what they're doing, focusing on themselves. They're doing good things. If you start limiting what you can do to say one show here or there, then all of a sudden, yeah, I suppose you get more breathing room with some of the superstars. Maybe give other people a chance to shine on a Dynamite or a 2-hour Rampage. But at the same time, like I say, with AEW, they're doing good things right now. They're only on the way up. So let's continue as it goes. And I do think they'll probably continue signing more people this year, but I think this is the year that contracts will start expiring and people will be let go as well. I think this is the year that AEW's roster does trim a bit because not everybody has become where they're on, you know, Dynamite every single week. A number of them are on just Dark and Dark Elevation, and arguably I don't watch those shows, so I never see them compete. And if Tony doesn't see the reason to put them on these sort of main shows like Dynamite or Rampage, then I don't see them staying with the company going forward, unless, you know, it's a very, very long-term project then, but which I don't see that being with everybody. Last question this week coming from Maxwell J. Freeman. Remember, he's better than you, and you know it. He says he's got no idea why they're retiring the NXT Cruiserweight Champion. In his opinion, he would honestly keep the championship active, and he feels that main roster guys on both Raw and SmackDown that aren't getting used could thrive in the division, and names that would fit perfectly would be like Ricochet, Cedric Alexander, Drew Gulak, Akira Tozawa, Chad Gable, Austin Theory, Angel Garza, Mustafa Ali. Have those guys float between NXT and the main roster would be a perfect for the Cruiserweight division. Great question, this one, and it does just go on to say further on the ideas of Roderick Strong and Santos Escobar, people being involved like that in the Cruiserweight Championship also. For me, it seems like a perfect Cruiserweight division roster, doesn't it, if you were to do it like that. For me, I would be most interested in seeing that championship perhaps used for the guys on Raw and SmackDown, like you said, as a championship where you can go to both shows. Maybe it fits perfectly if we end the brand split that we talked about earlier on in the video, and we could have this idea of, I don't know, like a Raw and a SmackDown. Some of the titles unified, so we don't have as many championships, and then you have a Cruiserweight Championship that someone like a Ricochet, Cedric Alexander, Drew Gulak can go for, and it goes back to being on some of the kickoffs where they'll have time to have 10-15 minute classics before a pay-per-view starts, because let's be fair, you know that there's so much talent in amongst those superstars mentioned that they could make a cracking division. It's just a shame because if you look back at the Cruiserweight division from 2016 to now, for me, it's not worked out the same way as what it did previously. When you look at the old generations of the Cruiserweight Championship with WWE, the Light Heavyweight Championship, and of course the classic, the WCW Cruiserweight division, arguably some would say the greatest Cruiserweight division of all time. For me, looking at it, it goes back to the start of that Cruiserweight Classic, a fantastic tournament. If we remember, it was booked so perfectly, it was done well, many people being signed from it, but if you go back and look at that tournament again, and look who was pushed immediately after it, things didn't quite fit. We had Kota Ibushi that got to the final, didn't get signed by WWE. Zack Sabre Jr. was also in the final four, didn't get signed by WWE, also went off to Japan and continued his work in the UK as well. You look at Grand Metalik, who wasn't on TV for ages after that, because obviously not the fit of what Vince McMahon was looking for, was a fit of what Triple H thought about, but not what Vince was. It shows that disconnect immediately from what we see of what's presented for NXT to what's presented for Raw and SmackDown. When we go to Raw and SmackDown with the champion, which was TJ Perkins, TJP if you want, he lost the belt very quickly to the Brian Kendrick, who turned heel, who had a great story actually in the Cruiserweight Classic. So that one, not as against the idea, but it was so soon that it kind of almost made you forget what this tournament even represented. TJP didn't even feel like he had a proper run with that championship, and his first real contenders outside of that were Tony Nese and Drew Gulak, who, let's be fair, they're great wrestlers, but they were not pushed strongly in that tournament. So I found an immediate disconnect, and it felt like a very filler thing that was going on with Raw when they were doing that, where they would break away and have the purple ropes and stuff like that. It just didn't connect very well for me. When it became 205 Live, I felt differently. I really enjoyed the show, particularly around the era of 2018, where we had Buddy Murphy, Cedric Alexander, Mustafa Ali, all top of that food chain that were having great matches week after week after week. But the problem was, once it was being filmed, I think it was after SmackDowns at this point, you know, it's middle of the week, we had SmackDown was on a Tuesday, it was live. People with kids weren't sticking around after the show because these people weren't presented as top stars when they were competing on Raw. They were then sort of pushed to the side on this little 1 hour weekly show, which, let's be fair, for the people that were interested, thought it was awesome, but for the casuals, the people that were, you know, half of the people that were actually coming to the arenas weren't sticking around for. So it was a shame that it didn't sort of play out the way it should do. But at the same time, once people then had done so well, they were pushed to Raw and SmackDown. We mentioned Murphy, Mustafa Ali, Cedric Alexander, and 205 was kind of left to rot, which is why it ended up then going to NXT, which, don't get me wrong, I think NXT did a good job of it when they had them. Had some great matches with Leo Rush and Angel Garza, Santos Escobar, and as well as Swerve Scott. So there were some great Cruiserweight champions in and amongst that era as well, Cruiserweight matches, but for me, the reason I found it a bit of a disconnect was for the reason you put in your original question. Why wasn't it used for superstars that were not getting a big rub on Raw and SmackDown? They could have used that championship, and they could have used it in a good way, because there was more talent and people that had been pushed well in NXT that had been come to the forefront, come to sort of Raw and SmackDown, but were not seen as people that were going to be pushed to go for world championships, perhaps even seen as too small going for the mid-card titles. So for me, that would have felt like a perfect natural fit, as almost like a transitional period where we had those people from the Cruiserweight Classic and we could have moved it onto the peoples like a Ricochet, like the Buddy Murphys of this world. Those people could have stood out at the top of that division and maybe it could have still been a thing, but it wasn't to be, it wasn't to work out, and sadly, under the current direction of what we've got with this new NXT 2.0, which of course it's no longer Triple H's baby, let's face it, it's Vince, it's John Laurinaitis, it's Nick Khan, it's Kevin Dunn's of the world, and the Cruiserweight Championship just hasn't been seen as the forefront. Kushida wasn't their sort of cup of tea at the start. They give the belt to Roderick Strong, let's be fair, did a fairly decent job as champion, but his last title defenses were not even against cruiserweights, they were against Joe Gacy. On the War Games show, we had Odyssey Jones as well, who's what, like 400 pounds. Definitely not a cruiserweight anytime soon, I would say. And then you look and say, right, okay, we had the match with Carmelo Hayes, which is someone is a cruiserweight champion, but is being pushed so highly and got such high hopes for that they actually see that it's beneath him. It's the North American Championship, the mid-card title they see. So for that reason, they seem to have got rid of it. And in my personal opinion, I don't think it's the worst move, judging what I've seen with NXT. I found the division a bit lackluster for a while, especially since they pretty much released the entire Cruiserweight division from 205 Live, mid to late of last year. So I don't see the same purpose, and the only way I would have seen the purpose is what you suggested at the start of the question, if it was actually used as a championship that could be used on both Raw and SmackDown. Here and there, a good Cruiserweight match for 15-20 minutes on Raw would be amazing, a short one on SmackDown, use it for your kickoffs, occasionally on the pay-per-view as well, and I think it could be a stand-up title, but sadly, it's just not to be. But that's all we've got time for this week here for Ask SCW. Thank you so much, everyone, for your questions. As always, I really, really do appreciate them. If you want to drop in a question for the next Q&A, all you got to do is get involved in the comment section here on YouTube. Leave the hashtag AskSCW with your question, or you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. All should come up on your screen right about now. Please like the video as well if you've enjoyed it. Share it with a friend as well. It helps spread the word of the channel a long, long way. Subscribe as well and hit the bell. Turn the notifications to all, each and every time a video is released. And let me tell you, plenty of videos are on the way. In fact, there's been so many videos already this year, so if you've missed any, go back and check them out. And like I said, we've got some more great videos coming this week, including deciding amongst the wrestling YouTube community what is the greatest Royal Rumble match of all time. That is dropping on the channel this week. And as well as that, I've got a fantasy booking video on the way as well for you on how I book the Women's Royal Rumble. So lots to look out for. And as well as that, dream matches that we need to see in WWE and AEW in 2022. And as well as that, I'm also going to try and sort out a video as well as seeing who I think will be the breakout wrestlers in 2022. So there's a lot on the way to the channel. It's a good excuse there to be subscribed, hitting that bell for the notifications, each and every time as soon as these videos are live here on YouTube. But that's all from me anyway. Thank you for watching. Have yourselves a great day. Thank you for watching as well. All the best. I'll see you next time.